वेलकम बैक दोस्तों, आप सुन रहे हैं मिड डेज विद मनी। हम हैं आपके मेजबान मनी, और जैसे कि मैंने बताया था, इस सेगमेंट में हम गुफ्तगू करेंगे प्रोफेसर लॉरी विलियम्स से, जो कि पॉलिटिकल साइंटिस्ट हैं। आप मॉन्ट्रियल यूनिवर्सिटी कैलगरी के साथ आप जुड़ी हुई हैं, पहले भी हमारे शो पर आ चुकी हैं। फिल वक्त अल्बर्टा की प्रीमियर डैनियल स्मिथ साहिबा और वजीर आजम मार्क कार्नी साहब के दरमियान एक तू में की बहस छिड़ गई है। संडे को मार्क कार्नी साहब ने कुछ ऐसा कह दिया था उनके बारे में। उन्होंने कहा कि मैं तो मजाक में कहा था। अभी थोड़ी देर पहले उनसे इनफैक्ट मीडिया ने पूछा भी कि द कमेंट्स दैट यू मेड अबाउट अल्बर्टा प्रीमियर डैनियल स्मिथ, डू यू थिंक दैट दीज कैन एलियनेट द वेस्टर्न प्रोविंसेस? मार्क कार्नी साहब ने कहा कि आई डोंट थिंक सो, इट वाज अ लाइट हार्टेड कमेंट. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has come out very strongly against the Prime Minister, and she has said that he doesn't like strong conservative women. What does that mean for politics at home and our united front against American tariffs? To talk more on this, we have with us Professor Lori Williams. She has been on the show before. It's our pleasure to have her back. Let's welcome her. Professor Williams, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much. It's great to have you back on the show.
It's good to be with you, Manny.
What do you make of this? Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is continuing to be in the news. Now there's a back and forth between her and the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has explained his remarks, said that, well, these were said in jest. These remarks were made in jest. I didn't really mean that. He was basically upset, and his party is also very upset about Danielle Smith appearing on right-wing television networks as well as podcasts in the United States. She has said earlier that she is not going to be silenced by quote-unquote Eastern media pundits, and she's going to do what's best for Alberta. What do you think? Is this the right thing to do?
Well, I mean, it's a deflective strategy, essentially. She's, rather than addressing the very controversial statements that she's made and some of the events that she's attended, she's saying this is an unjustified attack on her as a woman, and that she's going to fight for herself and for Alberta. I don't think there's a lot of contention around the idea of fighting for Alberta or Canada by communicating Canadian interests and economic realities to folks in the United States. I don't think that past appearances on Fox News or her attendance at governors' conferences, or even interventions to try to meet with folks who are influential on the Trump administration. I don't think any of those are raising the kinds of questions as the comments made about Pierre Poilievre being in sync with the Trump administration, or the idea that tariffs should simply be paused until the election is won, and then I guess things are okay. So at times, Danielle Smith looks like she is more willing to attack other Canadians than she is the Americans that are making threats against Canada. Those are the questionable comments that I think are in contention.
She has claimed in the past that it's like going into the lion's den to persuade Americans on trade. Is that a believable argument then?
Certainly in some of those contexts. Again, I think Fox News, Western Governors Conferences, events where she can actually speak to folks that are influential, who might have the ear of people within the Trump administration. I think all of those have the possibility of connecting with people who are persuadable and who are influential. But some of the things that she has said and some of the associations that she's made have raised questions. I think there's a difference between speaking to an audience that perhaps others in Canada, or with possible exception of Doug Ford, she can make a connection with some folks in the United States that other leaders in Canada might not be able to, or at least not all leaders in Canada can connect with. And that is, I think, an argument that's quite credible. But that's a different thing than questioning the content of some of her remarks or association with people who've actually said things that call into question Canada's sovereignty.
Do you think she is making a break with traditional Canadian conservatism? She seems to be aligning more with a very populist American-style right-wing ideology, at least very publicly.
Yeah, and there's no question that that's her roots, and that kind of populism, that conservative populism, is not new. It's just sort of taken on a different shape or form, one that is seen as more ambivalent in Canada than once it was. It is important that for her and for her predecessor, Jason Kenney, there's a minority of Albertans that are very well organized and motivated who are really pushing hard for some of the things that she's arguing for, whether it be around COVID policies, around advocacy for Alberta's status within the Federation, or even if it's about an Alberta pension plan or RCMP or equalization or whatever the case may be. There are folks in Alberta who are insisting that she advocates strongly on some of these files, and she isn't effective enough at that advocacy. She doesn't reflect these very vocal people that they could turn on her and threaten her leadership. So that's part of it. The other part is that she appears to actually have sympathy for some of these views, and it's that part, the sympathy for views that are really sort of to the far right or the fringe, compared with where most Albertans are. Most, even conservative Albertans, consider themselves moderate to centrist, and a lot of these views don't line up with that.
But do you think Mark Carney has actually crossed the line this time? Because that's what the press asked him, because he may have had things to say in jest, but saying those things publicly at a campaign rally against the premier of a Canadian province. Do you think that was politically wise, especially because Mark Carney is not drawing the audiences, the crowds that Pierre Poilievre is? And we had one yesterday in Vancouver, and only about 1,500 people were in attendance. That's making news this morning. But when Pierre Poilievre came to Surrey, he had about 5,000 people in attendance. So do you think that is something that can actually hit the Liberal Party's fortunes?
I think that, well, two things. I think that the campaigns that are being run by Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney are quite different. Mark Carney is not a politician historically. He's got relatively little experience. His approach is calm, measured, stable, a vision for the future that will steer us through difficult times. Whereas Pierre Poilievre is very much generating that kind of enthusiasm, tapping into some of those populist sentiments and motivations, and it's still uncertain which of those approaches is going to be most effective. I think, though, that Mark Carney's comments, I doubt they were planned. I don't think they were wise. One of the things that Mark Carney has in his background and experience, and even in what he's done since becoming Prime Minister, is he has this potential to build teams and work with people, to bring people together to deal with the challenges that Canada's facing. And it doesn't help to make a remark about one of the members of that team that you need to work with you for the future of Canada. It doesn't help to be making remarks about them. It doesn't fit with his image or his brand. Name-calling might work well for some politicians, for some leaders. It doesn't work well for Mark Carney. Certainly would have been wiser for him not to have made the comments in the first place.
But can these comments really fuel separatism or a sense of alienation in the Western provinces?
I don't think the comments are going to make that much difference one way or the other. Again, unwise, not helpful, but I think bigger questions are on the minds of most Canadians. Western alienation is a reality. You feel it in British Columbia, we in Alberta, when elections are decided before the polls even close in our provinces. The sense of unfairness, economic unfairness historically, of not having as much of a voice in the federal conversation as perhaps we would like. Those are legitimate concerns to raise, especially when you're talking about policies that are clearly targeted at the oil and gas industry, like emissions caps, which have economic questions surrounding them as well as fairness issues. So there are legitimate concerns and grievances that are being raised by Albertans, and there's a lot of skepticism in Alberta about whether Mark Carney is really going to protect or advance the interests of the Alberta economy. He's talking about pipelines, toyed with the idea of a shift in the policy on emissions cap, though he's a bit ambivalent on that. There are some in Alberta who don't believe it. We've heard from Preston Manning on this. He doesn't believe that the carbon tax will remain, will continue to be revoked. when or if Mark Carney becomes Prime Minister. He doesn't believe Mark Carney on pipelines, and there are some in Alberta who might think that. So it clearly shows that there are challenges. If Mark Carney does become Prime Minister, does win the next election, and most importantly, if he has representation in Alberta, it'd be very important for him to draw on that representation, reach out to Albertans and respond to some of these concerns. I don't think separatism is anywhere near as big a factor as some are suggesting, but the grievances are real and they're felt fairly broadly, and there's an opportunity here, if Mark Carney wins the election, to reach out to Albertans and to respond to some of the concerns that have been long-standing.
And just to clarify, you are not an Eastern media pundit about whom Danielle Smith is fretting and fuming over, right?
No, but I mean, and I have to say, I mean, in her speech in the legislature, Danielle Smith talked about people calling her a traitor or accusing her of treason. I'm very sad and disappointed that those kinds of comments are being made. They're being made on social media by just against people that people disagree with. I've gotten some of those comments as well, and I don't think they're helpful. I think we all need to look at the possibility of finding points of agreement, compromise, the ability to work together for the sake of Canada, because that is, I think, a central theme in the Canadian mood right now is, standing up for Canada or Team Canada, and I would argue that focusing on what we can do, working together, whoever wins the next election has got to be very seriously taken, no matter whether your party wins or not.
Professor Williams, thank you so much for making time for us this afternoon. It was lovely speaking with you as always.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you, Manny.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.